Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I think Vince called me sometime back in June and said, I have a favor to ask, and I said, yep, no problem, whatever it is. And then he started to talk about the program, and I got even more excited to be able to talk about what's happening with the future. It's a big part of what I do. As dean at the College of Architecture and Design, I'm constantly having to watch trends, and I'm so excited to see that happening and kind of expanding beyond just education. I know it happens in every sector. It's an exciting program today to be able to look at these different venues, these different sectors, from culture to entertainment to healthcare and education. I think it's also important for us to understand the economic outlook and what comes with these, and then some of us talking today about architecture, construction, and engineering. And what's so exciting about the program as well is that I want to thank AUC for also supporting students. I know this is through a lot of conversations with Vince and working with the ACE mentorship program, we see this as the future of the different disciplines related to architecture, construction, and engineering. So providing a scholarship is an added bonus to that, and so thank you. So to set these kind of ideas today, I think all the other speakers were told that they couldn't talk about the past, and for me it's very difficult to talk about the future without understanding the past. And what you see on the screen is what's called Martek's Law, and we're all familiar with Moore's Law. Moore's Law talks about how quickly technology changes, and there's a discrepancy between the speed of technology and the speed that either we as humans are able to adapt at, and more specifically organizations and say industries. And so when it comes to that difference between say an exponential rate of change and the logarithmic change of organizations, this is where leadership becomes so important, and it's something that at a technological university, this is something that we're tracking, right? Wanting our students to not only understand new technologies, but to be curious about it, to have fun with it, and to play with it. And I would say there's nothing more that's disrupted all of our industries in the last decade than the speed of technology and what's starting to happen with that. And I know that the speakers will be talking about this today as it relates to the future. Big trends related to these things. So we're familiar with mass production, especially being in Metro Detroit. The next round has been called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and it brings together a number of different aspects, from the speed with which technology happens to the different areas, whether that be biological, physical, and digital, the relationship between all of them. And I'm assuming that many of you that are joining today are from the construction industry, where that's the big trend, to move from something that was maybe conceived of digitally to then move to be present in the physical world. And so that's a lot of what you do. And I think we see a lot of trends beginning to affect that. And so I think also the program for today, thinking about the future people who are going to be coming up through the industry. What does that look like? And certainly we're all fighting for the same talent pool. And we see with this slide, this idea about where these digital and physical transformations are occurring. And it's not surprising that in our disciplines, we're slow to change. There's so much that we're responsible for, and so much responsibility that gets carried with these things, that we're slow to make these kind of quick changes that we might see in software development and in other areas. But this is something that we're looking at. And as I was looking at the slides, I also realized maybe it's time to update these, right? The disparity between what we understand as a cell phone. I remember talking to Vince in preparing for this. Can I share the fact? I think I lost Vince. I think he said at one point he used a telegraph to communicate with yeah, there you are. And certainly some of you fax machines, and probably some people in the room have no idea what a fax machine is. But we see the speed that technology changes at, and even the iPhone that's represented here is even 10 years old. We see this in the automotive industry. Both through it's not only the styling, it's not only the manufacturing, but the efficiency of the car, but also the safety of the car. And so I think these are trends that we see happening very quickly, right? Here's the challenge that we look at it. I know we're not talking about residential construction today, but if we kind of squint at these things, In a lot of ways, construction hasn't changed for many, many years. And so how could it change? How should it change? And that's why I love this program today so much. This book is a really wonderful book that looks at the relationship of manufacturing to construction, but it was written in 2004. Written at a time where I think there was incredible optimism, and certainly after the pandemic or during the pandemic, we understand supply chain issues. And so what the graph shows is this idea that over time, with reductions in transportation costs, we have access to more and more materials. I added the arrows on the right, where we almost see a reversal of that, having to start to think about things more locally as opposed to globally, where we source our materials, where these things come from, and certainly all of the complexity in the supply chain now. Anything that can be automated will be automated. This is just the way that it's moving. What's exciting for us is that the last thing to be automated will be creative fields. And so that's also how we disrupt different sectors, that's how we stay competitive, and these are the things that we do. And so we actually have to up our game, given that technology may and can and probably should take a lot of the tasks that we're doing. We can start to think about what we offer from a creative standpoint to support our clients and our customers and the way that this type of work changes. We've seen this in other ways in our own backyard in Detroit, this transformation of being able to do one type of car really well over and over and over again to the type of customizations that we can provide. And this is certainly linked all the way, speaking as an architect, linked all the way to the beginning of that process, how we might understand the support for our customers and the ability to customize these things all the way through to what this looks like in construction. These are also the things that, when we talk about robotics, these are the areas that we really try and look to automate, the things that are dirty, dangerous, dull, and difficult. And so we certainly understand these opportunities to be able to automate, but I think it also comes with some concern. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for what we're doing in our jobs? And certainly it's back to this idea, if I can go back, just to think about how we elevate our game as humans in this kind of technological ecosystem. And having had the opportunity a couple of years ago to visit a dairy farm where there were robots milking cows, this notion that robots should exist in a sterile environment, that they just do the same thing over and over again, I actually couldn't imagine, well, thinking about those 4 Ds, dirty, probably dangerous, imagining an opportunity where these robots are scanning the cows as they step into the stall, and imagining the possibility on a construction site that I would argue is probably more clean and more orderly than a dairy farm. And so there's certainly these types of possibilities. Looking at the relationship between how we think about the parts that are both spec'd and designed and placed in our buildings, so this notion of the digital twin. Anything that's designed now is designed digitally and virtually long before there's any physical representation of that. And so thinking about all of these building blocks, how we understand them, how we put them together, how we make construction documents and the instructions for construction and how these things go together. I think there's a lot to be done within this area, and we see these things changing. I won't go back as far as the telegraph, but for the younger people in the room, I have to say this all the time, the thing on the left is a map. And thinking about the labor that's involved in the creation of that artifact that's on the left, right, where someone drew by hand with a highlighter where your path was going to be, through this intermediary technology, what we see in the middle, where you would download the map and have that for 6 months or a year before you would update it again, versus this kind of real-time crowdsourced data. And this is where I certainly see design going. That anytime I spec a material or a product in one of my buildings, I believe, like, I wouldn't go to a restaurant without looking at the Yelp review. I should understand how many people just spec'd this, whether they liked it, what the long-term implications are. And so I think there's a lot of large data possibilities that relates to the design and then feeds all the way through to the construction industry. So I end with this one slide, which is something I've been coming back to a lot lately. For someone that's constantly trying to innovate and push the boundaries, British science fiction author Arthur Clarke had these 3 laws. And I'll just draw your attention to the first one. And I think it can be true of any of our construction and design industries. When a distinguished scientist states that something is possible, they're almost certainly right. But when they state that something's impossible, they're probably wrong. And so I'll leave that with you today in terms of how we use our experience and we think about those possibilities. But I think we also understand the difficulty of saying that something is not possible. And so I think through the speakers this afternoon, we're going to see an amazing take on what the future might look like. And my hope is that it's incredibly bright. So thank you.